give the call to the Honourable Shelley Eaton, and in doing so remind members that this is the Honourable Shelley Eaton's maiden speech, and I would hope that she would be afforded all the courtesies to which you were afforded. The Honourable Shelley Eaton.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'd like to commence this evening by acknowledging the Aboriginal traditional owners of the land on which we stand today, the Noongar people, and I stand proudly before you as a member of the Australian Labor Party representing the mining and pastoral region of this great state. I've accepted this seat somewhat unexpectedly, vacated by the Honourable Vincent Catania when he stood successfully for election to the other place as the member for North West. As a new member to this House until May next year, I thank the members on all sides for their welcome. I guess a difficulty for me is knowing that whilst I come to the Parliament with grand ideas for my electorate, I will not have the time to see all of those ideas develop into firm policies or strategies before my brief time in the House is up. I do hope, however, that the time I have in this place will allow me to share my ideas, strategies, hopes and aspirations for the people of the vast electorate of the mining and pastoral region, especially with the members of the Labor caucus and with members of this place, and at least plant the seed that will produce successful programs, particularly for the North. I'm proud to be here representing a party which has overseen and helped secure a period of great prosperity and growth, which has left the new government with a well-managed AAA-rated economy and a strong budget surplus. I'm also proud of the work undertaken by the recent Gallup and Carpenter Labor government in the North West, who set the foundations for effective negotiations that would provide all people with the opportunity to participate in the benefits of a strong economy. But more of this later. Firstly, some thanks and recognition. To my husband Graham and son Travis, who travelled down from Broome to be with me tonight, thank you so much for your love, endless tolerance and understanding. I could not be doing what I am today without your support. To my family who are here in the gallery tonight, my parents Pat and Ron Chamberlain, sisters Jodie and Renee, brother Guy, their partners Joe, Keith and Justine, my nieces Olivia and Priya and nephews Joseph, Scott, Blake and Rowan, thank you all for your support. I know you're all proud of me, but some of you think I'm just a little mad to have given so much of my life in service of the Labor Party. To my mother-in-law Margaret, who's no longer with us, I know you're watching over me and guiding me always. To my father-in-law Peter, John and Hiromian family, Richard, Steph, Ben and Dylan, and my dear friends Liz, Steph and David, I thank you all for your encouragement and support. To all the Parliamentary Services staff, many of whom have been friends of mine for the past 13 years or so, and those who I've met since being elected, I thank you for your encouragement and support. And to my electorate officer Stephanie Burrows and friend Paula Hickey, who have assisted me since being elected, I sincerely thank you also. I follow in the footsteps of a number of committed and hard-working Labor members before me. Thanks and recognition must go firstly to the Honourable Tom Stevens. In 1995, I commenced work for the State Parliamentary Labor Party when the Honourable Tom Stevens was then Labor Caucus Secretary. I must admit that at the time I knew very little about the mining and pastoral region, nor had I had very much to do with Indigenous people or culture. That has now long since changed. I was privileged to have had the opportunity to relocate to Broome in 2000 to work in the electorate office of Tom Stevens. It was then that I was truly captivated by the region I now call home and gained an understanding of the importance of diversity in regional Western Australia. I pay tribute to the passion and commitment of the Honourable Tom Stevens, who has always represented the people of his electorate with great energy. He continues to raise with his colleagues and bring to the attention of members on all sides the issues facing the people of his electorate. I hope I too can represent the mining and pastoral region, even for this short time, with an equal level of energy and commitment. I acknowledge the Honourable Liliana Ravlich, who I was fortunate to work for when she was first elected to the Parliament, and I'm enjoying working with her again in this place. I also acknowledge the Honourable Shelley Archer, who as a member for the Upper House with an office located in Broome works tirelessly for the people of the North West. Shelley Archer has been recognised in the Kimberley as a member devoted to representing her electorate, in particular the Kimberley region where she grew up and where some of her family remain today. I thank Shelley and Kevin for the generosity and support shown to me and my family over the past few years. I'd also like to mention the Honourable Ernie Bridge, the first Indigenous member elected to State Parliament. Ernie Bridge represented the Kimberley electorate in the Lower House for over 20 years, from 1980 to 2001, and held a number of ministerial positions throughout that period, including Indigenous Affairs, Northwest, Agriculture, Water Resources and Small Business. He was succeeded in 2001 by Carol Martin, the first Indigenous woman to represent the seat of the Kimberley, and who represents that electorate today. Against the backdrop of recent events in the United States of America, perhaps the Kimberley might one day produce another first, the first Indigenous Premier of Western Australia, or Prime Minister of Australia. My family's had a long affiliation with the Labor Party in the Parliament. My mother worked as a secretary and later as an electorate officer for a long line of great Labor members of Parliament. As a child, I can remember when she worked for the Honourable Lila Elliott with her office in Parliament House. In fact, in those days, members of this House were not entitled to offices in their electorates. They only had a parliamentary office with staff working from here. She then worked for the Honourable Roy Claughton and former Speaker, Honourable John Harman. It was during her employment with Lila Elliott that I got to know the corridors of Parliament, not as corridors of power, but as my childhood playground. I can remember as a child being brought in here during school holidays, probably so I wouldn't fight with my sisters, and folding letters, putting stamps on envelopes, and given other little jobs to keep me busy for the day. I always remember my mum telling me that if I came to work with her, I could have a Devonshire tea for morning tea. I guess I didn't know what a Devonshire tea was because I recall being disappointed when presented with a scone in the staff canteen. Not that the scones weren't good. Mum's office in Parliament House was on the ground floor. In fact, it was in the office that today is assigned to the State Parliamentary Labor Party. It was somewhat ironic that when I came to work at Parliament House some 20 years later, I worked from the exact same office my mum had worked in all those years before. In fact, I was sure I still had her original desk, chairs and curtains. Some of the office equipment had been upgraded in between. The old mechanical typewriter had recently been replaced by a computer keyboard and screen. Thank goodness most of the furnishings and equipment have now been further upgraded. When John Harman retired from politics, Mum moved into the federal political scene, working for John Dawkins during his years as Federal Treasurer and then with Carmen Lawrence. And before she finally retired, she worked for the Honourable Jim McGuinty. The family connection to the Labor Party goes further than just Mum. Her sister Delvane Timms also spent many years working for the Labor Party at party office. She was secretary to the Honourable John Cowdell when he was the State Secretary of the Labor Party and worked at party office until she retired in the late 1990s. My brother Guy also worked as an electorate officer for a number of Labor members. As you can see, service to the community through the Parliament and the ALP continues to be a large part of our family's life and work. I'd now like to focus on the electorate. The diversity of Western Australia and its many small regional communities presents challenges to all governments, and it is this aspect of diversity that I would like to spend some time this evening highlighting, particularly the region in which I live, the northernmost part of WA, the Kimberley region. Acknowledging and accepting this diversity presents challenges to policymakers and governments alike, because one size does not fit all. The Kimberley region of 35,000 people covers over 400,000 square kilometres. This is twice the size of Victoria. It is recognised internationally and nationally as one of the last great wildernesses of the world. The region includes the 6 towns of Broome, Derby, Fitzroy Crossing, Halls Creek, Wyndham and Kununurra, and more than 200 Indigenous communities located across this region, with populations between 5 and 1,000 people, with communities like Bidjadanga and Warman and others larger in both population and land area than some of the gazetted townships. This region boasts strong cultural connections to the land. Almost half, 47%, of the total Kimberley population is of Aboriginal descent, representing approximately 1/4 of the state's total Aboriginal population. This makes the Kimberley region truly unique in Australia. Between 1997 and 2007, the Kimberley's region's population increased at an average rate of 2.5% per annum, making it the second fastest growing region in the state. And by the year 2031, the population is expected to more than double. The community is relatively young. The median age for people in the region is 30, compared to a WA state median of 36. Significantly, the median age of the Indigenous population is 22 years of age. Despite the economic circumstances being faced by the international and national markets, the Kimberley continues to exhibit economic growth and social development. Opportunities for further development exist within a range of industries, including offshore oil and gas, onshore resource development, pastoral industry, Indigenous arts, agriculture, tourism, construction and manufacturing. Of these industries, the mining industry is already the biggest contributor to the Kimberley's economy, most notably through Argyle Diamond Mine. The economic potential of the Kimberley remains poised for growth. This brings with it a need for leadership, sophisticated management and a willingness on the part of government and industry to undertake full negotiations in the region. I hope to see Kimberley people grow in prosperity in parallel with the emerging growth in mining and agricultural prosperity. I want to see a government that shows leadership, a government that is competent to accept and work with the diversity and all the stakeholders in the Kimberley. I was therefore very disappointed, and I speak for many local Kimberley people who are increasingly concerned by the Premier's ongoing public utterances regarding the location of the Kimberley gas hub. Whilst I accept the new Premier's right to express his preferred option, after all, it was the previous government's process, not his. However, he has unleashed a set of consequences by disregarding the significance of the involvement of Indigenous people and their representatives in the gas precinct outcome. The Premier has effectively eroded the confidence of local people in the state government. The relationship is damaged, and there are now questions as to whether the government's word can be trusted. Secondly, the public statement by the Premier to ignore the right of veto by traditional owners on this project sent an immediate message to some industry leaders. It said that under Premier Colin Barnett's term as Liberal Premier, the views of Indigenous people may or can be disregarded. He has effectively reduced the status of Indigenous leaders as legitimate stakeholders in negotiations. Sadly, the coverage of hub talks by the West Australian newspaper on Saturday the 8th of November confirms this. The damage has been done. Native title holders are not just any other interest group. They have legal rights and interests that leaves government with obligations to deal with those rights and interests with respect and in accordance with the requirement of law, let alone the Australian ethical imperative to give them a fair go. The new Liberal national leadership must demonstrate high ethical standards for negotiation. The new government must make it clear that the Indigenous leaders will sit at the negotiation table with industry and governments as legitimate and respected stakeholders. After all, the East Kimberley's Rio Tinto experience has shown that mining and development opportunities are made possible and enhanced when it is coupled with respectful negotiation processes. The previous Labor government had respected these principles. I am confident that cooperative agreement is achievable if all parties are invited to sit equally at the negotiation table. There must be goodwill, there must be trust, there must be respectful, ethical leadership by this new government. Ultimately, I am confident to say that this is the only way forward. This leads me to a very important issue in the Kimberley, local leadership. The issue of leadership is foremost in our minds. As we know, the first Black American was recently elected to the presidency of the United States. And a couple of weeks ago, the Sydney Peace Prize was conferred on the Kimberley's Patrick Dodson. I congratulate Patrick. This award is clear recognition of his national leadership role and the principles for which he stands, justice and equality. The people of the Kimberley are most fortunate to have this leader in their community. Australia, he said in his acceptance speech, now has the chance to construct a new society built on equality and justice and in harmony with the land and its people. It is not an impossible task provided that we have the love and enthusiasm to begin the journey. The rest will follow. Sadly, this government's recent actions to silence local voices will make this opportunity a more difficult road. Development has already begun in the Kimberley, and there is growth emerging in various parts of the region. Local leadership and local participation must underpin any way forward, and this participation will be crucial to success. Just want to sidetrack for a minute to talk about the Kimberley Institute, which highlights this very issue of local leadership and local participation. Since the demise of ATSIC, Indigenous leaders from across the Kimberley region have been meeting to discuss how best Indigenous people in the region might engage effectively with all spheres of government, industry, the corporate sector and the broader Kimberley communities. Views held by many Indigenous leaders include that there has been a loss of formal Indigenous representation at local and regional levels, The degree and form of local and regional participation and representation from Indigenous people has changed. Indigenous-specific programs under ATSIC have been mainstreamed into other government agencies, and there is an increased focus on coordination across departments and tiers of government. The Indigenous leadership in the Kimberley recognised that there was a need to establish regional mechanisms and processes that could fulfil this need. Unlike many other parts of Western Australia, the Kimberley region has had a long history of regional cooperation and partnership between Indigenous organisations and communities. This collaboration has seen the establishment of regional organisations that draw their mandate from Indigenous peoples from across the Kimberley. As a result of those post-ATSIC meetings, the Kimberley Working Group was established. This small group of key leaders based in Broome included Stephen Barber Albert, Patrick Dodson, Kevin Fong, June Oscar, Ethel McClellan, Paul Lane and Tony Lee. The group met regularly to undertake strategic consultations and meetings with key Indigenous leaders and organisations in the East and West Kimberley, state and Commonwealth agencies, parliamentarians and state ministers, with all providing support for the establishment of an Indigenous independent think tank in the Kimberley. The establishment of the Kimberley Institute, the think tank, provides an opportunity to bring strategic focus that builds on the oral cultural traditions of Kimberley Indigenous peoples and maximises the potential of these new arrangements to bring about positive change. For example, it can provide research consultancy services to governments and industry that improve regional responsiveness, provide information on the impact of the new administrative and policy arrangements and bring focus to regional partnership and shared responsibility agreements. It can articulate clear policy positions that support the spiritual, cultural, social and economic well-being of Kimberley Indigenous peoples through focused research. It can support and enhance broader engagement to maximise the benefit of government policy to Indigenous peoples. It can provide a forum for dialogue within Indigenous oral cultural traditions. Support the development of cultural match across Kimberley Indigenous organisations and emerging representative structures. Cultural match is about getting things done in ways that fit with Indigenous understandings and beliefs about how it should be done. And it can take part in promoting Indigenous interests at state and national levels. In reality, the Kimberley Institute is still in its infancy, but it does highlight the depth of local Indigenous leadership. This group recognises what needs to be done and simply sets about finding solutions. Western Australia is frequently lauded for its great economic success, and the latest statistics boast a statewide unemployment rate of 2.2%. This is a fantastic result. Yet behind this statistical success is the hidden level of unemployment that often goes unrecognised and is relevant to the Kimberley and the Pilbara regions. Sadly, Indigenous people are grossly overrepresented amongst the unemployed. However, against this fact, there is progress being made. I would like to recognise the work being undertaken by a number of the major resource companies, including Rio Tinto, BHP Billiton and Fortescue Metals, who are amongst those who have made significant and genuine commitments to increasing the participation rate of Indigenous people in their operations. In the East Kimberley, for example, the Argyle Diamond Mine, as a major employer, entered into a renewed relationship with the Indigenous traditional owners, and a formal agreement known as the Argyle Participation Agreement was struck that has seen a number of benefits, including the rate of Aboriginal participation in their workforce grow. In Argyle's own words, the solution to Aboriginal disadvantage lies fundamentally in interacting with Aboriginal people as equals and respecting land and culture. Contrary to the fears of some, this respect has resulted in an embracing of Argyle's right to mine on traditional lands and a genuine pride and ownership of the diamond mine by traditional owners. The natural beauty of the Kimberley region is something we need to protect for our children and our children's children. Whilst I appreciate the wealth and opportunities that exist in the region, with the oil and gas industries in the Browse Basin being the current example, we must be vigilant in ensuring that the coastline of the Kimberley is protected. It's about getting the balance right, and like the example set in the East Kimberley, it is about undertaking genuine and full negotiations. I'm very keen to ensure that the final site chosen for processing onshore will not only be environmentally sound, but fully engages and be sensitive to the Kimberley's Indigenous community. I know only too well the third world conditions experienced by too many people living in the north. So many homeless people, so many overcrowded homes. It certainly says something about the commitment of family when you see already large Indigenous families taking their extended family when they have nowhere else to go, without any regard for the pressures this will place on themselves. On a daily basis, I see families camped in the mangroves around Broome, and I know this is not unique to my hometown. You see this homelessness all across the Kimberley and Pilbara. Unfortunately, the cost of accommodation, both temporary and permanent, is now too high for many to afford. Wait lists for public housing are long, land releases are not affordable by many, and building costs are high. What we need as a matter of urgency is affordable short-term accommodation for the visitors who travel throughout the regions. Every year, particularly during the wet season, we see a major influx of visitors to the towns in the Kimberley and Pilbara, many travelling from their home communities to visit with family for medical reasons, cultural ceremonies, or simply to avoid the isolation in the remote communities associated with the wet. Well-managed, clean, affordable, short-term accommodation is desperately needed, and I encourage the state government to rapidly advance such projects across the northwest. I'm also very concerned about the health and well-being of all residents in the region. Under the Gallop-Carpenter Labor government, we have been fortunate to see major capital improvements in health infrastructure across all towns in the Kimberley, and the construction of the new Headland Health Campus in the Pilbara is now also well underway. This has provided greatly improved working conditions for the health professionals and a far more pleasant environment for patients. However, so much more still needs to be done. We have visiting specialists in the region, but we need more. We still have too many residents being forced to travel to Perth for ongoing treatment, requiring them to leave their families and support networks for extended periods of time. I believe many of these patients could and should be treated in their hometowns. In particular, I refer to the treatment of cancer patients. Diagnosed cancer patients are not able to receive their chemotherapy or radiotherapy in the regions. Some are required to spend several weeks at a time in Perth receiving treatment, maybe once or twice a week, away from their families and friends, and I think this is unacceptable. I understand there are still several renal dialysis patients residing in Perth who are from the northwest, unable to return home indefinitely as there are not enough dialysis beds available for their ongoing treatment in the north. If more dialysis beds were established in the satellite dialysis unit in Broome, which is something being suggested at the moment and I would support, there is also not sufficient accommodation available for them to live in whilst having their treatment. As I've said, there are considerable shortfalls in the delivery of adequate housing, effective education and health, yet there is ongoing effort across government and there remains more to be done. It has been well documented the negative spiral that occurs due to the relationship between health, housing, education and the capacity for participation in regional economic development. Health and education strategies like Closing the Gap are being worked through between the Commonwealth and state governments. The policy framework is well intentioned, but unless the local community is included into its development and delivery, the potential for success will be negated. In October 2007, I was successfully elected onto the Shire of Broome for a 4-year term as councillor. At the time, I felt the council had become too focused on development for its own sake and was forgetting about its social obligations in the town. I was concerned that there was not enough for our kids to do. We weren't catering for the large number of visitors to our town with basic facilities like shade, water and public toilets, and that land releases were simply out of the reach of so many locals wishing to purchase their own homes. Not only at the Shire of Broome, but across the electorate of mining and pastoral, we must promote strategies for affordable and adaptable housing, support youth programs that enhance the lives of the young people and encourage the provision of safe places to socialise, support local small business with a sound but flexible approach to zoning, and encourage environmentally sound planning and sustainable development. To my fellow councillors, Graham Campbell, Nick Weavers, Rob Lander, Chris Mitchell, Chris Marr, Mick Albert, Peter Matsumoto and Elster Foy, the CEO Ken Donohoe and the great team of directors and staff at the Shire of Broome, I thank you all for your understanding and support during my time on council and in Parliament. I look forward to continuing to represent the people of Broome, both through my work in the Parliament and with you all on the Shire of Broome. One community organisation I'm extremely proud to be a member of is the Scouting Association of WA. I live in a scouting house. My husband is the Broom Scout leader, my son a patrol leader, even the dog's name is Scout. Not to be left out, I became the group manager of the Broom Scout group. 2 years ago, the Commonwealth Government provided funding to Scouting Australia for an Indigenous scouting program in northern Western Australia. The intention is to introduce and establish scout groups in remote communities in the Kimberley. Last year, the Branch Commissioner for Indigenous Scouting, Mr Ian Darwin, and the National Indigenous Scouting Program Coordinator, Rick Warne, travelled to Fitzroy Crossing to talk up scouting with the local community members. What was evident from these meetings was that whilst there was interest from both the kids and parents about participating in scouting, the locals really had no idea what scouts do. It was then that a decision was made to take experienced scouts from Perth to the Kimberley to participate in a week-long cultural exchange program called the Kimberley Connection. 25 scouts and 10 adult leaders from Perth, 7 scouts and 3 broom leaders all participated in an amazing week of scouting activities in Fitzroy Crossing. The Perth Scouts introduced the local Fitzroy kids to Scout Law and Promise, orienteering, including having to find their breakfast in the bush by compass, abseiling and craft work. In turn, the Fitzroy group introduced the Perth Scouts to Indigenous painting, stories of their law and culture and traditional foods. By the end of the week, there were over 50 Fitzroy kids involved in the program. The week culminated with an overnight vigil of the Australian flag before participating in an Anzac Day dawn service in Fitzroy Crossing, where the Scouts then put on breakfast for the townfolk. One thing about scouting is the fellowship that is developed through these types of events. I know several of the Perth Scouts who are still in contact with children from Fitzroy Crossing and who identify the Kimberley Connection Camp as one of the most inspirational experiences they've had during their years in the scouting movement. As a result of this camp and the continuing visits and networking by Rick Warne and Ian Darwin, a scout group now exists in Fitzroy Crossing. The Broom Scouts have also done a similar camp on the Dampier Peninsula at the Juddigen community, where the Broom Scouts were taught how to make traditional spears, and our kids taught the Juddigen group how to build a bridge with ropes and poles. We're now only weeks away from the Juddigen Scout group being officially launched. As a government, we need to welcome such initiatives into remote communities in this state. The young people in these communities need to be involved in activities that build self-respect, teach respect for others, and provide them with life skills. I would hope that if approached for support, the state government will recognise the benefits such programs are delivering into the remote communities of Western Australia and will provide them with the support necessary to ensure their continuation. I acknowledge and congratulate the outgoing Chief Commissioner of Scouts, Sue Mitchell, who has overseen this Indigenous scouting program in Western Australia and committed so much of her life to the scouting movement. I also congratulate Ian Darwin and Rick Warne for the work they continue to do on this program. The safety of children in isolated and remote communities has been well publicised. Any of you who have knowledge of the issues surrounding the protection of children, and I note the Honourable Member opposite, will realise that isolation is a factor that features in cases of child abuse, regardless of cultural backgrounds. For this reason, the work that is undertaken to resolve these issues must reduce the isolation faced by their children and their parents. The establishment of remote policing posts by the previous government has gone some way to protect children and families. However, this is only one piece of the jigsaw that will ensure that children are not subject to abuse in the future. At risk of repeating myself, the fundamental to any success is the engagement of local people. There are already well-established local organisations and effective local leaders willing to find solutions and work with governments to keep children and families safe. At this point, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge and congratulate the women of Fitzroy Crossing who found the strength to stand up to government and some of the local community in seeking the ban on the takeaway sales of full-strength beer in the town. To June Oscar and Emily Carter, I say congratulations and well done. I know this was done with the support of Maureen Carter, the team of Nindalingari Cultural Health and many others in the town. It's had amazing positive results in the town. The old people are now feeling safe, children are being fed and sleeping much better, providing dramatically improved learning opportunities for them at school. The hospital is reporting far less incidents of domestic violence and alcohol-related injuries, as have the police reported far less alcohol-related crime, violence and damage. My ongoing concern is the lack of the complete range of support services that are yet to be made available in Fitzroy Crossing and other communities across the Kimberley to help deal with the underlying issues associated with alcoholism. I'd just like to return to the issue of isolation again. Isolation is not just about living in a remote place. It's about feeling remote, not a participant in the everyday workings of society, not having choices economically, being dependent, lacking the basic skills and necessities for a future. This sense of isolation, in its broadest sense, is still the experience of many local Kimberley people. And in this context, we have some real and ongoing challenges to achieve justice and equality in the Kimberley, particularly if the current government and the Ministers for Regional Development and Indigenous Affairs advance with new strategies for regional governance in areas like the Kimberley and the Pilbara and in the other very remote regions of WA. I would like to acknowledge the leader of the National Party, whose Royalties for Regions campaign responded to the ambitions of so many regional and country people. I sincerely hope he manages to achieve real benefits for the region, and he has my support for this. I remain, however, unclear as to how the new government will decide which regional infrastructure projects get the tick. Having had experience with regional projects and the previous government's very effective regional infrastructure funding program, I am well aware of the huge challenge ahead for the honourable member. What is the funding criteria for determining a successful infrastructure project? How will the fund be administered? Will there be a requirement for matching funds by an applicant? Will the fund even be contestable? What is the role, if any, for the Regional Development Commissions? Is there a role for the Regional Development Council? Do you have plans to amend the Regional Development Commissions Act? How will local governments fit into the process? Will they have a role? I note that during the last sitting week, despite the media release issued by the Minister for Local Government, the Minister was unable to explain how a program would operate and the role of local governments. How will those regions most in need or disadvantaged get access to the fund? Will it be those communities who shout the loudest or can exert political pressure on your Liberal partners who will be most successful? And in light of the Treasurer's call for across-the-board agency cuts, can you ensure that government agencies will maintain their core responsibilities in regional areas and not make their cuts there? I fear that government agencies may view the royalties for regions as a way of sourcing the funds that they otherwise should be finding from within their own departmental budgets. There remain many unanswered questions around the Royalties for Regions program, and I believe the Leader of the National Party will need to provide clarity to the House and to the people of regional Western Australia. In concluding, there is little doubt, despite the current lack of significant infrastructure and in spite of global economic challenges, the Kimberley region is poised, ready for growth. The environment in the Kimberley is nothing short of uniquely spectacular, and the recently released movie Australia, set in the East Kimberley, will continue to shine the spotlight upon us. Our challenge is to develop a future that can be shared by the majority, not the minority. We must break the nexus of isolation in its broadest sense. Underpinning this ideal is ongoing effort and continuing investment in education, health and housing that will encourage independence and a diverse economy for all to share. These policies will only have greater success with the inclusion of local people and their full participation. This will require governments to lead by example. Governments shall be required to accept, recognise and respect the diversity of the Kimberley. The future will require an educated and talented pool of locally based people to meet future economic and employment challenges. We must maintain healthy and safe communities. Can we provide adequate infrastructure in this remote region that will provide children with a broader set of life choices and possibilities? I am hopeful that in my lifetime that I will see the inevitable shift from an economy that has a strong welfare domination to one that is diverse and enables Kimberley people to make real choices for their future. When this happens, the possibilities will be endless. Pat Dodson, in his acceptance speech of the Sydney Peace Prize, said, "Freedom, peace and justice are values that are universally yearned for by all peoples. Today, the challenge is not to get the market edge for ourselves alone, but to ensure that other nations are not forced over the edge and into the abyss of further poverty, despair and disintegration. For the Kimberley to succeed, ideology shall be put aside, leadership and respect shall be pursued, and we can expect that sitting at the negotiation table is the full gamut of stakeholders. Perhaps the Kimberley will produce another first. We can show others that embracing diversity and encouraging broad participation will result in success.